well-managed blood transfusion service will ensure that its inventory management principles will ensure that no unit of blood will lie on the shelf for more than 2 weeks, which is actually, 1/3 of the theoretical storage time. Supposing I go and donate a unit of blood, what the blood bank does is it separates the blood into packed red cells, plasma, and platelets. Now, different uses are therefore different. Now, for instance, if somebody is an anemic, that anemic patient needs only packed red cells, does not need the plasma, does not need the platelets. Somebody is having internal bleeding, that internal bleeding patient needs only platelets, does not need the plasma, does not need the red cells, which is actually unnecessary. So this is a more efficient way. This has actually really improved the efficiency of blood transfusion, because your one unit which you donated can go and help 3 patients at least.
What made you make these blood banks? Why did you choose to make anything else?
Actually, what happened was I met a very interesting person. I walked into this National Institute and just to find out about what are the possibilities, what are the technologies which they have on offer. And I would have walked out 30 minutes later saying, yeah, nice, interesting stuff, and maybe I should think about it. But often in life you will find you meet somebody who completely changes your view of yourself and your view of life. And I met, unfortunately, I met such a guy. His name was Professor Ramani. So I walked into Professor Ramani's office. I don't know him. And I said, I'm this IAS officer, I'm planning to quit and I want to do some, I want to do an interesting project, and can you suggest something for me? And in 1 hour, he fired me up and sent me out convinced that I was born to do this project. I was born for this kind of thing. I mean, so it is amazing. Professor Ramani was the sort of guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo. I mean, meaning he was a technologist. And this kind of inspirational person is sometimes a guy who can turn you 180 degrees around. You may have said, okay, I want to go to IIT, I want to do this, I want to do that. Then you'll meet somebody who completely changes your view, and that's what happened in this case. I didn't know what a blood bag was, I didn't know what biomedical devices were. And 1 hour later when I walked out, I was seeing stars literally, or I should say not stars, I was seeing only blood bags. So anyway, the moral of the story is, you are going to meet sometime in your lives, you will meet such a person or persons. And those are great moments, You can't plan these things happening. And when those things happen, don't fight it, just flow with it, and you'll find, some marvelous things can happen in your life. It is not that you should therefore just wait for this kind of person to come along. No, you should go ahead and do whatever you're doing, but be prepared for the fact that some such very inspirational, marvelous character may come along who will change the way you think.
Do you add anything to the blood before storing it in the preservative to make sure it doesn't go bad?
The problem is the blood taken outside the human body will clot immediately. So inside the blood bag we fill a pre-measured quantity of anticoagulant. The specific task of this anticoagulant is to prevent blood from clotting. Most important rule about blood transfusion is try not to give it. Meaning, blood transfusion, blood is given only if it is absolutely necessary. If there is no other way to save the patient, then you must give blood. This is in the case of acute demand for blood, where there has been blood loss. Because blood is a liquid tissue. And what you're doing is actually a tissue transplant. So, you would have heard about organ transplants, isn't it? How doctors have to take so much precaution in matching the donor to the recipient, and even then you have to give all kinds of supporting medication because the immune system has to be suppressed, and so many things has to be done, isn't it? So blood transfusion is actually a tissue transplant. Therefore it should not be something, it is seen as something which is very serious, can have adverse consequences, though it is a well-established science and by now. And therefore, when you mentioned about toxicity or whether it can be poisonous, whether it can have adverse effects, yes, it can. For example, transfusing the wrong group of blood is like injecting poison. The patient is dead, he's gone. And if more than, say, 30 to 50 ml has already been of blood, of the wrong group of blood has been transfused into a patient, nothing can save the patient. Patient goes into shock. It's a anaphylaxis, what's called it's a massive shock, the whole system happens. So it is equivalent to injecting poison if it's the wrong group. So you have to be very, very careful.
There are different processes, if I'm correct, from all the way from taking the blood from the donor to transportation and finally giving it to the patient. So could you just explain those processes?
There are two kinds of demand for blood. Mostly what we see and what you see in the posters and in the blood donor motivation posters, the short films, documentaries and all that, is acute demand for blood, where there has been loss of blood which has to be replaced. Now, loss of blood can happen because of an accident, a motor accident or something. It can happen because of due to surgery. During surgery, there is blood loss. That is planned blood loss. You know that you're going to lose so much blood. Also, it can happen due to various other conditions like internal hemorrhaging and things like that. So that is acute demand for blood, where there is a loss of volume. We all have about 5.5 liters of blood in our system. So if there's a loss of volume beyond a certain level, our system cannot take it and it will go into shock. We can manage a little bit of loss of blood, but bleeding beyond a certain point, the system goes into shock. So that's acute demand for blood. There is another demand for blood which is not very well known, and actually that demand is the bigger demand, in even volume wise. That's called chronic demand for blood. Now, chronic demand for blood comes from, say for example, if a person is suffering from cancer and they have to take chemotherapy. Now, when chemotherapy happens, to withstand chemotherapy, they need infusion of platelets. Now, platelets are a component of blood. Typically speaking, when you donate 1 unit of blood, just to tell you how small that platelet amount is, if you donate, from every donated unit of blood, you can get a few milliliters of platelets. To combine this, to build a therapeutic dose, that is to build a dose which is meaningful for a patient, you will have to take blood from 6 people and mix the platelets collected from the blood from 6 people to pool it into one dose. So in other words, let me put it this way. If a cancer patient needs, say, 100 units of platelets over a period of 6 months, 600 donors have to donate blood for this one cancer patient to get 100 doses of platelets. Okay? So it becomes, so this demand for blood is much bigger. This is one example of cancer patients. Then there are cases like, there are people who suffer from blood disorders like hemophilia. Now, hemophilia is where you don't have the clotting factor. So even you can bleed to death from a shaving cut because the blood will just keep on going. It won't stop. So any cut can be fatal unless it is surgically sealed, because the person does not. So for such people, there is an element, there is a blood protein called anti-hemophilic factor. Now, anti-hemophilic factor can be harvested from human blood, and you can build up a therapeutic dose and inject it to hemophiliacs who need it. Similarly, there is a condition called thalassemia. Thalassemia is another condition which normally those who have it, unless they have access to regular, a thalassemia patient will need blood transfusion every day of her life or his life. I mean, not every day, for the rest of his life, every 21 days. And if you actually go to a thalassemia clinic and you watch these kids coming in for their next shot, next transfusion, they come and they're like wilting flower, small children, 6, 8 years old now, just like wilting flowers. They come in, and then they get the transfusion, and they're a normal child again. It's like, it's magical. Right in front of your eyes, you see this little kid suddenly opening up, smiling again, bright, and walking out. Whereas he had to be probably helped in, and that. For such people, again, you need, this is called chronic transfusion. So you have acute and chronic demand for blood.
What are the success rates that you have achieved with these blood bags?
My initial annual production capacity, my factory produces in 1 day today. What I produced in 1 year in the first year, that was our capacity. We had such a small factory. Or else the factory has become so big today, whichever way you look at it. So we started off so small and started. We first established ourselves in India by replacing glass bottles, slowly, painfully picked it up. Of course, India is a very price-sensitive market, and the reference points are all the wrong things, like glass bottles only cost this much. So I say, yeah, that's glass bottles. This is a plastic bag, for God's sake. It's disposable and sterilized and all that. But still, since the market growth was not fast enough for, I was a little impatient. Like all entrepreneurs, we want to grow faster than what the market allows, which is impossible, of course. So what we decided was, we did something which was really a counterintuitive thing. We decided we'll enter the export market. So we entered the export market, and I sent my first shipment off to Philippines, where I got a real bloody nose for it because it was rejected and it came back and all that. That was but a big, huge learning experience. Today, the company exports to this, which is a high-tech medical disposable, which comes under the highest class of regulatory scrutiny anywhere in the world. You know what I mean is, to make these bags, you have to comply with a lot of regulations and standards. To export these bags to certain countries, you need all kinds of certifications and inspections, etc. In fact, unlike other products, in the case of blood bags, from the first enquiry which comes, supposing an enquiry comes from Venezuela today, the first commercial discussion about price and shipment terms will happen only 9 months later. For 9 months, what are we talking about? We are talking about regulatory compliance. The Venezuelan government will tell us, these are our standards. They will nominate an inspector. The inspector will come and inspect our plant. We can't just produce certificates. They won't accept it. So it comes under the highest degree of stringency because it's classified as a life-saving device. Therefore, the greatest satisfaction, the greatest achievement which I feel is that we entered the export market because we had no choice, because the domestic market was growing too slow. And that turned out to be a wise move for us because we got ourselves established. We learned a lot of things which we would have never learned in the domestic market. We learned about the importance of packaging. We learned about the importance of, the kind of instruction manuals and all that which you put in, and appearance, and even the quality of the carton. See, here a shipping carton in India, we think, what is this? It's a shipping carton. People are going to throw it away. So how does it matter? You can buy 6-ply, you can take 4-ply, you can buy virgin paper, you can have recycled paper. We learned all those things don't work. And that quality of the carton, quality of the label, quality of the instruction leaflet, etc., all those things matter. So we learned very good lessons there which we've been able to apply here. So today, as I said, the daily shipment, 2 containers leave the factory every day for export markets. Of course, we are located, interestingly, that's the downside of doing business in most parts of India, is our factory is located in a place where container trucks cannot come because the roads will not allow it. So I have to hire a warehouse in Cochin port at great expense, clean it up and bring it up to medical device regulatory acceptance standards, and stuff the containers there, which actually is 2 handlings, 2 loading, unloading, and all the costs associated with it. So to conclude, the great satisfaction, the great achievement which we feel is that starting from almost zero literally, and in a country where there was no history, no tradition of, or no systems for good medical device manufacture, in a very short time we were able to enter export markets and start shipping large quantities. And today the factory is, it works 3 shifts round the clock, 24/7, and we still have orders.
There's a lot of advice given to entrepreneurs and startups, but is there any advice that is perhaps ignored by most people, or simply not realized? perhaps something more unconventional?
The advice which I would give is, first is that, I don't remember the exact quotation from Goethe, the great German poet, but he says, boldness has a certain genius in it. Just having an idea and wanting to do something itself is, you're already 50% ahead of, 50% ahead of the game, because you have a passion to do something. So first thing is, have that, do something only if you really want to do it, and not because all your friends have done it, or you know so many people who did it and they're making lots of money. But if you're not interested in that, you're not going to succeed with it. It won't work. So I think the first thing is, have something and get interested and passionate about it, and be bold enough to go out and try it. Second thing is, always remember that failure is one side of enterprise. After all, who fails? Only the person who tries. The best way never to fail is never to try anything, isn't it? Just sit quiet, sit tight. You can't fail. So, the entrepreneur, failure is something. Life has binary outcomes. It's yes or no, success or failure. Then go out and try the next time. But the thing they say about it is, I heard this memorable phrase: if you have to fail, fail fast, and quickly go on to the next thing. Don't keep hanging on to it until the writing has been on the wall 6 months earlier. You're still hanging on to it, and it goes on to the bitter end, and then only you realize, okay, I failed. That's not good enough. You must be able to. So second thing is, I think you must realize. And the third and final thing which I want to say is, which I don't think I have not read in many of these books. So what's the formula? You're facing failure, you're facing difficulty, and this is not just for entrepreneurship, this is for life, my young friends, because all of us are going to be tested in life. And one of the greatest lessons from me was, it may sound a very trite thing, but it has a lot of meaning, is I realized, and that has kept me sane and kept me working, was tomorrow is another day. All you can do is, sometimes you feel you've reached a blank wall. You've tried everything. You've thrown, you've borrowed your last buck and everything, and you put it in, and now there's nothing more you can do. What do you do? So you must realize that all that you can do is do your best. Beyond that, there's nothing you can do. Then go to sleep. And go to sleep and try to get a good night's sleep, knowing that tomorrow is another day. Meaning, you wake up, your problems are all still there, the banker is still there, everything. But start again. Just to give you an example, you may think, so what's so great about this bit of advice? You will find something outside changes. Your problems, all those issues remain the same. And day after day you're going at it, and gradually even your positive energy is now slowly declining. But you're still saying tomorrow's another day, and going to sleep and waking up. Then one fine day you find the bank manager has changed. Another bank manager comes. Now that guy, and whom you don't know, you go again. The same lines, the same argument which did not work with the predecessor works here. And your problem is solved. So, I'm telling you, you ask any entrepreneur, anybody who has done anything worthwhile, you ask all the Narayana Murthis and the Azim Premjis and the Nandan Nilekanis, you ask them, if they're honest about it, they'll tell you, many of the things which really bailed them out at very difficult times were serendipitous things which happened over which they had no control. If you're a religious person, you will ascribe it all to miracles and all. I'm not a very religious person myself, but I understand that there is a huge role of chance and the unexpected in this. And this keeps happening. It's a dynamic universe, isn't it? Everything is keeping on changing all the time. The important thing is you mustn't give up. So that's my